You're already late. Again. Your phone is buzzing on the table. 3 different apps fighting for your attention, and your keys are somewhere. You remember holding them. You swear you put them right there. But now there's just empty space and that familiar warm rush of panic moving up your chest. You tell yourself, I had one job, just one. Get ready, leave on time, be the version of you that has their life together. But on the way to the door, 5 micro moments steal you. A notification, a stray thought, the sink that suddenly looks too full, the message you forgot to answer yesterday, the weird feeling that you're forgetting something. By the time you catch yourself, 10 minutes are gone. You're standing in the middle of the room with your heart racing and no idea what you came in here to do. From the outside, it just looks like you're scattered, careless, maybe even lazy. You know that's what some people think. Part of you worries they're right. But inside, it doesn't feel like laziness. It feels like trying to hold 5 different radio stations at once in your head while the volume keeps changing without your permission. It feels like deeply caring, making silent promises to do better, and then watching those promises melt. The second real life starts moving. Most of your life, the story has been, what's wrong with me? Maybe the better question is, what if this is simply how your brain was wired to move through the world? Because that question changes everything, doesn't it? When you stop asking, what's wrong with me? And start asking, what is this brain actually built like? You step out of a moral courtroom and into something closer to a map. Most people never see that map. When they hear ADHD, they picture the cartoon version, the restless kid bouncing in their chair, the teenager who can't stop talking, the adult who just needs to grow up and get organized. In that story, ADHD is a character flaw dressed up as a diagnosis. You're smart. You can focus on the things you enjoy. So if you're missing deadlines, forgetting plans, or losing track of basic life admin, the explanation must be simple. You're not trying hard enough. You've probably internalized parts of that story. On good days, you call yourself messy or a bit all over the place. On bad days, the words get harsher. Lazy, flaky, unreliable, broken. The gap between what you intend to do and what you actually follow through on starts to feel like a judgment on your worth as a person. But underneath the stereotypes and the shame, ADHD isn't about how much you care or how intelligent you are. It lives in the systems that manage your day-to-day life. Starting, prioritizing, shifting, remembering, sustaining, finishing. And when those systems are wired differently, the whole experience of being human changes. To understand that difference, it helps to meet a few versions of you. In one version, you're the powerhouse in brainstorming sessions. Your colleagues know that if they toss a vague problem into the air, you'll catch it and spin 5 creative solutions before anyone else has warmed up. Ideas come in constellations for you, clusters of connections other people don't see. But then the meeting ends. Everyone goes back to their desks, and the simple act of opening a blank document and beginning the actual proposal feels like trying to push a car uphill alone. So you stall. You answer an urgent email, tidy your desk, scroll for a minute that becomes 10, follow a thought into a tab, then another. Somewhere in the background, a quiet panic hums. You know this is important. You want to be the version of you that just starts. Yet your body stays on pause until the deadline is close enough to burn. Only then does something flip, and you race through hours of work in a frantic burst, exhausted and ashamed. In another version, you're the friend people call when their world is falling apart. You're an incredible listener. In crisis, your focus snaps into place and you're fully there. But outside those intense moments, messages slip through. Plans get forgotten. Birthdays pass unnoticed. To the people you love, that can feel like indifference. To you, it feels like the most painful kind of mismatch. Caring deeply, but not being able to consistently behave like someone who cares. If you trace that mismatch back, it usually doesn't start in adulthood. It starts in a classroom. You can see yourself there. Feet not touching the floor, the smell of dust and paper, the fluorescent lights humming. The teacher's voice moves across the room, and you're trying, really trying, to hang on. For a few seconds, you manage it. You write a word, underline a sentence. Then something tiny steals you. The flicker of a shadow on the wall, a thought about lunch, a shape in the clouds outside. By the time you notice you've left, you've missed 3 instructions. Pay attention, the teacher snaps. Laughter ripples behind you. You weren't trying to disrespect anyone. You didn't choose that moment to disappear. But the scene gets stored in adults' minds as evidence. Doesn't listen, easily distracted, doesn't care. Later, homework lives in a strange limbo. You start it, then wander away. You finish it and forget to hand it in. You remember it just as you're falling asleep. And you hear lines like, "If you can focus on games, you can focus on school," as if interest and effort were the same lever. Nobody sits you down and says, "Your brain's management systems work differently." What you absorb instead is simpler and much harsher. If I were a better kid, I wouldn't be like this. Those early conclusions don't just stay in childhood, they sink into your sense of self. By the time you reach your 20s, 30s, 40s, those early echoes have often solidified into identity. Every forgotten appointment isn't just a scheduling slip. It's more proof that you're that kind of person. Every late bill, every abandoned project, every unread message lands on the same bruise. You might even joke about it, classic me, because laughing feels safer than admitting how heavy it is. But if we zoom in on the mechanics under these moments, what we see isn't laziness. It's an overworked control panel. ADHD lives in the set of processes psychologists call executive functions. The abilities that help you decide what to do, when to start, how to sequence steps, how to hold information in mind, how to keep going when a task is boring or frustrating, and how to shift gears when needed. For many people, those functions run quietly in the background. They're not perfect, but they're reliable enough that life feels mostly linear. Decide, start, continue, finish. In an ADHD nervous system, those same functions are more like a flickering Wi-Fi signal. Sometimes they're strong, sometimes they cut out at the exact moment you need them. Motivation doesn't line up neatly with importance. Time doesn't feel steady. The path from I should to I did is full of invisible trapdoors. Seeing this clearly isn't about letting yourself off the hook. It's about finally naming the real engine driving your days, so you can stop fighting ghosts and start understanding what your brain has been trying to tell you all along. When you look at it through that lens, a lot of your mystery behaviors start to make painful sense. Executive functions sound abstract, but you feel them in the most ordinary moments. Task initiation is the invisible bridge between "I should do this" and "I've started." For many people, that bridge is short and sturdy. For you, it can feel like a canyon. You can see the task clearly. You even know the steps, and yet, your body doesn't move. You watch yourself not starting, and you don't know why. Working memory is the ability to hold things in mind while you use them. It's the reason someone can think, "I need my keys, wallet, and headphones," walk to another room, and still remember all 3. In your brain, that list might evaporate halfway through the doorway. replaced by a new thought about something else you should do. People call it forgetfulness. To you, it feels like the thoughts themselves are slipping through cracks you can't see. Then there's self-monitoring, the quiet awareness of what you're doing, how long it's taking, where your attention is. In ADHD, it's like trying to drive with a rearview mirror that only works sometimes. You glance up and suddenly realize an hour went somewhere you didn't intend. On their own, these glitches are frustrating. Layered over a lifetime, they don't just shape your schedule, they shape your emotional world. Because ADHD doesn't only bend your attention, it also colors your feelings. For a lot of people with this wiring, emotions don't arrive politely and wait their turn. They crash through the door and take over the whole room. A small criticism, a neutral text, an odd look from someone you care about. These things can lodge in your mind like a splinter and stay there all day. It's not drama, it's intensity. You might notice that when you're upset, it's hard to think about anything else. It's like a mental virus hijacks the system. The email you meant to send, the task you meant to start, the appointment you meant to remember. Everything gets pushed to the edges while your internal screen is filled with one looping scene. The argument, the mistake, the imagined disaster. On the outside, people may see overreaction, moodiness, sensitivity. On the inside, you feel flooded. And because of all those old stories about being too much or too emotional, you might try to hide it. You perform calm while your nervous system is burning. This is where shame sinks its deepest roots. Not only do you struggle with tasks, you also struggle with how you feel about struggling. You're not just late, you're guilty. You're not just distracted, you're defective. And when time itself starts to behave strangely, the guilt doubles. One of the strangest things ADHD does is distort your sense of time. For many people, time feels like a line: past, present, future. There's later and next week and 3 months from now, and those points feel real enough that you can act for them. In an ADHD nervous system, time is often more like two boxes: now and not now. Anything that isn't pressing you in this moment tends to slide into the fog of not now, no matter how important it is. That's why you can sincerely care about future you paying the rent, finishing the project, going to the doctor, and still not move until the due date is close enough to produce panic. It's not that you don't understand the consequences. It's that your brain doesn't translate important someday into energy today, without either high interest or high urgency, so you end up living in cycles of crisis. Calm periods feel strangely slippery. You can't get traction. You promise yourself you'll get ahead this time. But nothing sticks until the deadline roars into the present and finally flips the switch. Then you sprint, burn out, crash, and swear you'll never do this to yourself again. From the outside, people see irresponsibility. From the inside, it feels like you're constantly waking up in the middle of a fire you knew was coming and still couldn't make yourself prepare for. Over years, that pattern doesn't just exhaust you, it starts to convince you that maybe you're simply built to fail. And when a pattern repeats long enough, the mind stops treating it like a glitch and starts treating it like identity. You're not someone who sometimes misses things. You're the one who never has it together. You're not someone whose brain freezes under low stimulation tasks. You're the unreliable one. You may even preemptively apologize for yourself. "I'm a mess, sorry," as if you need to warn people before they get close. Underneath the jokes, there's often a harsh internal narrator. It remembers every missed appointment, every forgotten birthday, every angry sigh from someone waiting for you. It rarely remembers the context, the way your brain tugged you in 10 directions, the invisible effort you spent just to arrive at almost on time. It certainly doesn't remember your strengths with the same sharpness. So you start building armor. Perfectionism in the areas where you can deliver to make up for the places you can't. Overgiving in relationships so people won't leave when you inevitably drop a ball. Hyper-awareness of others' moods, because if you can sense disappointment early enough, maybe you can fix it. None of this comes from being selfish or careless. It comes from years of being misread, and then joining your critics inside your own head. The psychology of ADHD isn't just about attention and time. It's about what happens to a person's sense of self when their genuine effort and their visible results keep drifting out of sync. This is where ADHD stops being just your problem and starts bleeding into every relationship you care about. If you grew up being told you were too much or not enough, you probably learned to read people very closely. You notice micro changes in tone, tiny pauses, the way someone's eyes shift when they're hurt or disappointed. That sensitivity can make you an incredibly attuned friend or partner. You feel other people deeply. You can sit with pain most people look away from, but the same wiring that makes you so responsive emotionally also makes you inconsistent practically. You forget plans, you're late. You zone out halfway through a story on a day when your brain is already running at maximum capacity. You fully intend to pick something up on the way home, then arrive empty-handed, trying to piece together what you missed. From the outside, that can look like not caring. For a partner who values reliability, each missed commitment might feel like a small betrayal. If this mattered, you'd remember. They don't see the invisible battle you fought just to remember as much as you did. They don't see how much you hate that look on their face. So you overcompensate. You say yes more than you should. You take on extra tasks. You promise yourself you'll finally become flawlessly organized. For them, for you, for everyone. And when your brain inevitably slips in the same places, the story deepens. I'm not just failing at work or school. I'm failing at love. At this point, it's tempting to conclude there's something fundamentally wrong with you. But philosophy offers a slightly different angle. Think of Viktor Frankl's idea that between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space lies our freedom to choose. With ADHD, that space can feel tiny, crowded with noise and urgency, yet it still exists. Your brain may fire off impulses, emotions, distractions with unusual intensity, but you are not identical to those bursts. Stoic thinkers talked about dividing the world into what we control, what we influence, and what we must accept. Your baseline wiring, the way your nervous system handles attention, time, and emotion, is largely in that third category. You didn't choose it, and you can't simply mindset your way into a different brain. But what you can influence is the story you tell about it, the systems you build around it, and the way you ask others to meet you. That doesn't mean turning ADHD into a romanticized superpower and ignoring the pain. It means seeing the full picture, the limitations and the capacities, the impulsivity that causes trouble and the spontaneity that brings life, the hyper-focus that can derail your day, and the same hyper-focus that allows you to dive deeply into what you love. Once you stop framing every struggle as a moral failure, you can start seeing it as a design problem. Given this brain, this history, this nervous system, how do you build a life that actually fits? Part of that design is understanding what help can and can't do. When people talk about ADHD treatment, the conversation often jumps straight to medication, with a lot of fear and misunderstanding attached. But at its core, the idea is simple. In many ADHD brains, the chemicals that support focus, motivation, and executive function, things like dopamine and norepinephrine, don't regulate in the usual way. Tasks that are important but not urgent don't generate enough signal to cut through the noise. Medication, when it's appropriate and well managed, doesn't give you new values or a new personality. It's more like putting on glasses. The world doesn't change. It just comes into clearer focus. The bridge between "I should do this" and "I can start this" shortens. That doesn't erase the need for effort, but it makes effort actually get traction. And meds are only one piece. Psychoeducation, learning how your brain works, matters. So do external supports, calendars you actually see, reminders that interrupt the fog, body doubling with someone else working quietly beside you. Therapy can help you untangle the shame and perfectionism that grew around your symptoms long before anyone named them. None of these tools make you normal. They're not supposed to. Their purpose is more modest and more radical than that. To give your nervous system enough support that your values, your intentions, and your actual behavior can finally start living on the same page. The rest is architecture, how you arrange your life around the reality of your mind. Instead of asking, "How do I become like people whose brains work differently?" the question becomes, what actually works for this brain? Maybe you notice that you come alive with novelty, people, or time pressure. So you choose work where there are moving parts, human contact, or clear deadlines, instead of forcing yourself into roles that demand quiet, solitary, repetitive focus for 8 hours straight. You build scaffolding instead of relying on memory and willpower alone. Visual to-do lists that live in the spaces you actually look at. One trusted place for keys, wallet, and phone. Timers that externalize time so it doesn't all collapse into now and not now. You break big tasks into the smallest next action and celebrate starting, not just finishing. You also begin to negotiate honestly with the people close to you. Not "I'm hopeless, accept it," and not "I'll be perfect from now on," but something truer. Here's how my brain tends to work. Here's what I'm doing to manage it. Here's where I'll need reminder systems, not just lectures. Slowly, the story shifts. You're no longer a broken, normal person. You're a specific person with a specific nervous system, learning how to steer a vehicle that isn't standard issue. There will still be missed turns, but there can also be a growing sense of partnership with your own mind, with the people who matter, and with the life you're quietly building to fit the way you actually are. And maybe the most radical part of this whole process is how you begin to relate to yourself. For years, the voice in your head has probably sounded like a tired, disappointed parent. "Again? Really? What's wrong with you?" That voice didn't appear out of nowhere. It's an echo of teachers, parents, bosses, partners who misread your struggles and assumed they were seeing attitude instead of neurology. You swallowed their frustration and turned it inward. Reparenting yourself with ADHD doesn't mean making excuses. It means changing the tone of the narrator. Imagine speaking to yourself the way a genuinely good parent would speak to a frustrated child. Firm about reality, but never cruel. "Yes, we forgot this. Yes, there's a consequence. And also, I see how hard you're trying. Let's figure out what would help next time." You start noticing the effort that used to be invisible to you. The micro choices, the small adjustments, the times you caught yourself sooner than before. You practice giving yourself context, not just verdicts. Instead of "I failed again," you ask, "What was my brain up against here?" What support was missing? You also let people in. You explain your patterns not as excuses, but as information. If I don't write it down in front of you, I'll probably forget. If I seem distracted, it's not because I don't care. The right people don't use that as ammunition. They use it as a map. And slowly, you begin to experience something many people with ADHD have never truly felt. Being known as you are, not as who you're pretending to be. So let's return to that morning. You're already late. Again. The phone is buzzing. The keys are missing. The familiar surge of panic is there, but this time, something else is present too. A thin thread of understanding. You recognize the micro moments stealing you, the notification that wants to drag you sideways, the urge to follow a thought into another room and never come back. Instead of collapsing into, "Here we go, I'm hopeless," you pause just long enough to name what's happening. My brain is doing its ADHD thing. I know this pattern. You set the phone down in another room. You say out loud, "Keys first." You still lose 10 minutes, but maybe not 20. You're still late, but you arrive with a little less self-hatred. The psychology of people with ADHD is not a story about broken willpower. It's a story about nervous systems wired for intensity, immediacy, and constant improvisation, trying to survive in a world built on linear time and quiet focus. It's the story of children misread as careless, growing into adults who become their own harshest critics, and then, sometimes, learning a different way to see themselves. That different way doesn't erase the difficulty. The bills still exist. The messages still pile up. The keys still go missing. But alongside all of that, something more human and spacious begins to grow. A sense that your mind is not your enemy, just a demanding companion you're finally starting to understand. And from that understanding, a quieter kind of courage appears. The courage to keep trying, not as someone who is supposed to be different, but as the person you actually are.